Welcome to the DevReady podcast. For those of you new here, I am meeting Stephen for the first time today. So we're both all the listeners and myself will dive in and just learn a bit more about what you do, and then we'll have a chat about startups. So Stephen, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thanks, mate. And a nice new intro. So I'm Steve, as I mentioned just a moment before we started recording. I'm the general manager of Shadowboxer, a Melbourne-based venture studio. What that really means is I kind of generally try and manage the business. I've got more of a strategy and product management and brand building background from my different stages of career, but have the good fortune to work with some awesome technical experts and incredibly creative designers and strategists at Shadowboxer, and obviously with some awesome founders of a myriad of different types of businesses in the early stage venture space. So thanks for having me on.
So it's a pleasure. So there's definitely a bit of overlap there of sort of working in the non-tech startup space, and that's what we've done. I've touched a bit on the brand just over the years and having to work with agencies and designers and telling startups, have you got a brand? Like just at the very early stages. But I'm terrible beyond that point, probably in anything in that space. What do you like about the startup space that's where you're focused on?
When we started the business back in 2020, just as, we went into lockdown. Yeah, a very interesting time to start. All of us were probably running away from big corporate. So we worked in big digital agencies, lots of big, long projects with lots of stakeholders, talking about, managing Jetstar.com and, the Mecca mobile app and things like that. And while there's lots of great, exciting work there, I think all of us who started Shadowboxer had a yearning to get our hands a bit dirtier, work a bit closer with entrepreneurs, because it is a different mindset when you're building a business that you've got full skin in the game on as a founder versus building or conducting your role as an employee in an organization. We had a couple of projects with founders directly at the very start, which we're very lucky to have through connections, and I think we all just caught the bug of the founder life, the startup mindset, and truthfully, it helped us build a culture in Shadowboxer that kind of self-exacerbated our love for startups. So this kind of moving at pace, this idea of such a high stakes environment, often if you mess up a brief or a project in corporate context, yes, there are stakes, but nothing quite like a business is failing or not. And we also the energy of trying to test and iterate, I think was really infectious. So that type of the way of working was probably what drew us in the most. And then secondarily, if you're lucky enough, as you probably found too, you get to work on really interesting and innovative solutions and products. You get to build things at the forefront of technology. And I'm not saying we've been involved in deep tech and all this kind of advanced stuff, but we have had a great exposure to generative AI development, probably earlier than a lot of digital agencies would have. And the other factor is we also got to invest too and put our own skin in the game and get access to a really great asset class by having a different sort of commercial model where we don't just take fees, we can also get paid in sweat equity, basically.
Yeah, there's more opportunities or different kind of opportunities than you would have in the corporate space. Corporate, you've got the ladder to climb, or you can go horizontally and bounce across to another business. But startups is, like you said, different projects. We work on, I know we've probably got about 11 running at once at the moment, and there's nothing the same. Every project is completely different. And then as sort of the architect, so you don't know anything about me. My background is I was a developer running the business 17 years straight out of uni, so I didn't have that corporate pivot. This is all we've ever done. So
good on you.
Moving up the chain, thanks, and learning sort of how to architect things, it's designing, like you said, at that forefront and testing new things and trying to deliver what clients need, but you're becoming an expert in each of those little industries, which for me is perfect because I love to learn as much as possible.
Yeah, I definitely empathise with that. This sort of role suits those people who are maybe curious, maybe not great at keeping attention and focus. Like how great is it that you get to work on a bunch of really smart people's amazing ideas and help shape them. And you get that variety. Some people are great at just focusing on one thing and going deep, deep and deep. Whereas I love the opportunity to kind of, learn a bit about this one week, learn about something else for next, come back to the other thing again. And, it's a really richly satisfying career from that variety and keeping the brain working, that kind of perspective. The other thing that's I think is really interesting is it's for team collaboration and problem solving together. You kind of you basically pick up a spade next to a really smart bunch of people and just get shoveling and try and figure it out. And that's a really rewarding process too. And I think I'm not saying you don't get that when you work from an agency and a corporate perspective. And actually, I love some of the work we do for our corporate partners too, because it's the same principle. We're still starting stuff versus managing a big, massive enterprise platform. And I hats off to those people who can, navigate those more complex environments. That wasn't for me, and it's probably not for our team too. But I definitely empathise with your journey. And to be honest, kudos on the, just going straight from uni into that. You've completely sidestepped the corporate ladder and just built your own thing. And I think that's a pretty commendable achievement too.
Yeah. Oh, when we started, it was 22, 23? It's been 17 years this year, so 22.
Nice.
I thought, this is the best time to do it. I've got no debt, no family, no mortgage. It's the least riskiest time to try it.
Yeah, you're right. I think maybe if I'd have known the world was going to go into lockdown in March 2021, I might have thought slightly differently about what I was, quitting my job. But it definitely was easier to start a business before having kids. Now I've got one and a second on the way. And I do wonder to myself, would I have the same kind of approach to or risk aversion, with starting a business? I'm sure I would, but I'd be probably safer. Think about it a bit more rather than just going, right, hand him a notice in.
You'd have a bit less time to try and start it.
True.
That would be probably the biggest difference.
That's true, yeah.
But like you mentioned there, it's the enrichment you get from having to learn all these different things, but then working with a variety of different people. And I'm sure you probably don't miss the email chains in corporate where there's about 15 to 20 people CC'd in an email to make one decision, and it lasts for months.
Totally. And, I think I'm a relationship person. I think I'm quite good at building relationships, but mostly I get a lot of value from having, relationships with a big, diverse set of people. And that's that's personally quite gratifying too, working with the business owner and the founder directly, and not having all these different layers of stakeholders and someone who you only hear about or see on an email chain who ultimately has the decision making control, and they're in a different time zone and country entirely. You kind of feel like it's just a small cog in the wheel, and like your ability to affect change feels so much smaller. Whereas if you can just pick up the phone literally at any time, sometimes, to a founder that you're working with, say, hey, we need to make this decision, or hey, I've got some bad news, or hey, I've got some good news. I just think it's a much more human way of working, and gets the results far faster. You can turn things around in 24 hours versus a couple of weeks and getting something scheduled to go into a forum or a subcommittee or whatever. That startup mindset and that urgency to deliver something is very different in corporate. You'll end up having those deadlines and something has to get done. But realistically, if nothing's done by that deadline, nothing's going to change in the business. It's just something's changed. Where in a startup they've got no more money. There's a critical event that if they don't hit that event, it might not happen for a few years again, potentially. So they've missed that market, or it's very different. But then, mentioning having those startup founders available to talk to at any time. I've got, 20 different WhatsApp groups, just pinging messages to each other, sending things and memes. And you build a relationship with the person who you're directly affecting. Yes, absolutely. And you build relationships with these typically very smart, brave people who are starting a business, and you learn a lot from them personally and professionally too. And I think that's probably not spoken as much about as a kind of benefit, but yes, they might be coming to you for a particular service, but you get this opportunity to grow together professionally and learn from each other, and it's definitely a bit of a pressure cooker when you're building a business versus the other context.
So, in working with startups, have you seen things change over the last few years in the startup space? I know there's been, since COVID, a lot of problems or people identified as a problem with sort of like the funding and that drying up and slowing down with the way the economy's going and interest rates and stuff. How have you seen sort of the whole gamut of things change?
Yeah. Well, we definitely felt it. So the first 18 months, the market was so frothy, and there was so much great opportunity, and probably a little bit too much capital being thrown around. So we got a lot of great work opportunities. Our business grew very quickly, which was awesome. Then we definitely felt the crunch come in. I think was it around 2022, 23, and we haven't really felt that properly, I guess sort of ease up. There's definitely been a bit more momentum over the past 6 months, but it's the big themes over the past 24 months for me have been just not access to funding or funding drying up, just the pace of being able to get a cap raise over the line, and the scrutiny that has increased around traction metrics and growth. I feel like you could raise money on a piece of paper not so long ago, whereas you definitely can't do that now unless you're a very well revered serial founder with a good track record. But I think that's only created a bit more discipline. It's certainly made us as kind of investors too, made us much more diligent. Well, increased our diligence around the sorts of deals that we would get into, how we evaluate projects, where we really spend our time, and having very honest and frank conversations about when we can help, when we can't help, and why we think we shouldn't in this instance. I think that's feedback's a gift, and whether someone needs to agree with it or not, it's still valuable input. And then I think the one thing I have seen more recently is probably just for speed, which we now prototype or get products into market. Yep. And actually there's a growing divide between businesses that have that mindset of velocity or constantly looking to increase velocity and hacking with different tools and testing new things versus others who've maybe got themselves stuck in the mud through more traditional product management and technology development processes, but haven't quite kept afloat with the myriad of new tools, whether it's AI coding support or whether it's low code solutions. There are certain products which need time, and there's certain software which is complex and it will take time to develop, right? But I think to be able to test and prototype and even pre-totype, that's the big trend that we've seen change over the past 4 years, certainly since our inception. It's not that it didn't exist 4 years ago, it's just culturally I think the startup and product development community have embraced that a lot more, which means it's a really exciting time to get a business off the ground. And if you're in the right space, you can probably do a lot more than you thought you could without cash, which is great.
Yeah, and there's more tools than you can ever build a list to go and look at and review.
Totally.
It's
overwhelming.
It is, and it's overwhelming to try and keep up, especially when you're trying to deliver solutions and pick tools. So I know, like you mentioned, Bubble is probably the first one most people think of, a no-code tool. That's been around for a long time, and then now it's more accepted to try and deliver a prototype with it. But there's 100 or 1,000 competitors that are similar to that have Gen AI in their ChatGPT under the hood that are now just building the screens for you and getting you to a level of being able to do that. Yeah. But like you mentioned, there's some startups that will only get you so far. Then you're going to have to build a proper solution, do it properly.
Totally.
That's your secret sauce, is the platform. So if you're building on top of another platform, there's not much benefit there, because then anyone can replicate that shortly. Yeah. But in touching up on what you said there, probably a bit of a controversial take is, I think that tightening and that extra checks and balances that all businesses, the startups, are going through was required. Because just having money thrown around, while it's great if you're a startup, you've now got these metrics that you're going to have to try and hit, and you'll just be chasing them forever. Where what you should be trying to do is trying to have a business that's going to work and actually has revenue and then has a path to profit, not just chase the next funding round, so you can just keep going.
Absolutely. I'm personally quite excited about more awareness and an increasing amount of funding kind of vehicles for what you call the non-unicorns. Unicorns are great, and the unicorn factories and VC factory is a great thing. Love that. Would love to be part of a lot of those too. But there's so many great businesses that maybe don't need to be $1 billion. Maybe they'll be half a bill, and you know what? And they'll make a lot of people a lot of money, and they might not have the same cap table profile, and the founders will be able to just focus on what's right for the business and growing it. I do think there's been more focus and a bit more of a tightening of the belt of VC cash. I think there's been a lot of businesses and founders and VCs too going, hey, this is what we're for, this is what we're not for. So I'm excited to see how that goes over next decade. You know, we've worked with some awesome venture debt partners who are building great communities like Tractor Ventures. I think family offices and PE to an extent are coming, getting earlier stage with their investments, and equally venture studios. We talk about a venture studio from the context of building a new business with a founder. Yep. Like we don't mind if that business is going to be a multi-billion-dollar business. Well, that'd be great. But we're pretty happy building just a great big software business too. That spits out some lovely profits for all involved and can make a big impact on the world. So I think that's something I've been quite keen on and hope to see more of over the next decade. It's a bit more maturity and diversity in the types of businesses, and how they're funded and what those opportunities can be for people's commercial outcomes.
And I think that's the trend you're probably seeing across the market, and that's what the tightening's happening. Yeah. And that's probably the best way to avoid what the AI bubble or whatever they keep talking about that's going to pop at some point, which is just don't throw money at things because it seems like a good idea. Because there's probably people throwing all this different money at the same idea as well.
Totally. Ideas are important, but I would say certainly the stage that we play in, but it's completely secondary to good people and making progress. And that's kind of what you back is like, does this team of people tackling this problem, are they moving at a pretty good speed? Are they picking up momentum? Does it start to feel as if like, hey, there's something happening here, it's got a bit of a magnetic pull? Because the product could be completely different in 2 years. That's the nature of the chase of product market fit. But if you've got people who've built either audience or start to solve a problem really well with a scrappy prototype, and you're seeing the numbers go in the right direction, that's what you should focus on, because you can get, we can romanticize the idea sometimes, but the reality is the idea is just a starting point. It can change and evolve quite significantly, but you're right, people will throw money at a nice shiny sounding idea without thinking about some of the more the risks and the headwinds and all that kind of stuff.
Well, everyone has ideas. It doesn't mean they're worth anything.
I got loads of ideas.
I come up with an idea every time I just walk down the corridor. Like, it doesn't mean it's going to make a great app, and then let alone thinking about how to execute, deliver it, and then market it. A lot of people don't think about the marketing side, and that's not just a product market fit. It's how do you tell people? Because there's always going to be a group of people that will use the product because you're hitting on their needs, and that's the key thing. But then, how do you get that in front of them? How do you educate them? Or how do you convince the other people in the market that don't know that problem exists yet? And that's probably where we see with the founders is, I genuinely classify them sort of like two types. There's, you're in an industry and you're very experienced in it and you're seeing a problem in it and you've come up with an idea to solve an issue in that specific industry. Or you've had a successful business, you've got an idea and you think, because you've been successful in vertical A, I'll now take that into vertical B. And they're the ones that I think face probably a bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, listen, there's amazing talent out there, who will be able to do that. But yeah, that is definitely harder to go and take your knowledge and insights, apply it differently. You've got to really look for the transferable opportunities and surround yourself with great advisors who can de-risk, that leap that you're making. But yeah, I certainly love working with domain experts. We've done a lot of work with clinician founders over the past few years, and I find them to be a particularly a valuable partner when it comes to startup, because they have intimate knowledge. They're already high performant and pretty disciplined, and usually they're they've got a little bit of cash already because they've got quite a significant job. They can throw something at making something happen, which is often part of the journey. Really, have you got the right network to be able to tap into to give it a little bit of a spark to start a journey.
Yeah, and that's quite important because it has to get bootstrapped off the ground one way or the other. And if you haven't got the cash in chasing funding on an idea, it's just getting more. It's increasingly getting harder as we go, because investors don't want to have 10 years of losses like a Snapchat or an Uber before they start seeing some money come back. They also have a limited pool of funds.
Not in this
and they're
market.
affected- yeah, they've got a limited pool of funds and they're affected by things. But
Yeah,
I think that's where
absolutely.
maybe people are sort of chasing more sort of family offices now rather than VCs because they're seeing that the games
Be
are
more patient. Bit more
Yeah,
patient
and-
capital. Yeah.
it's probably an easier game to play because you're not chasing quarterly KPIs, having to respond to now 10, 20, 30 different people and giving them all independent updates and
Yeah.
chasing their agendas and how they're going to push you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even in VC world, you can spot the difference between the rat race of the very big funds, I imagine, versus say slightly smaller funds where there's less institutional capital and it is more family office in those funds. You can, whilst yes, they have the same motive to get large scale, big commercial outcomes. Unicorn chasing, but there is a slightly different culture, it seems, in terms of how those GPs and venture partners work with the portfolio businesses.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, listen, it's there's great funders right across this market, like more than there was 10 years ago, and we've got a really great startup sector, I think, with an awesome track record and a lot of great operators. Like, I enjoy every event that I go to when I meet people, from whether they're fresh into the industry or not. There's a really cool investor community here in Australia.
It's definitely growing and getting larger. And then if you've got a great idea and you can prove a business model, get some paying customers, you'll definitely find the right funding if that's what you're
Absolutely.
chasing. So you'll find that along the way. Again, it comes down to the network, like you mentioned. What's sort of your take on the founders that you're dealing with where it's a non-tech founder that's moving something forward? Because that's generally probably why they're approaching you and your team, and that's why they come to us. So I'd love to get your opinion on that.
We actually work with a lot of founder duos where there is a technology focused co-founder, and when it's that instance, they're coming to us for speed. Really, it's like, hey, you are a senior team, we can afford to pay you to get from A to B because we know it'll be faster, and then we'll slowly start to build our own team off the back of that, rather than try and build a team and form it. So we find that's part of our value proposition. Really, it's we've got an onshore team who have worked together for a long time, who can provide that speed. I mean, I guess the flip side for the non-technical founders, where they don't have anyone in their team who has that tech bent. We try and work with them where they are like relentlessly focused on the customer and the problem, and we basically fill all the other gaps. We obviously play that role too, but I think you have to have someone making the calls and representing the customer and taking that product role. So that's usually the way it works. We've definitely had relationships where it's probably been a little bit too much like a agency vendor relationship, where the founders aren't necessarily doing enough, we would say, of the role. They're probably doing a component of it really well, but not enough of running the business. And that leaves this bit of a delta between us and them, and where we're like, hey, we're building this product. You're doing, let's say, focusing on partnerships, but actually, who's really thinking and driving this business as a whole? And there's probably between the two of us some gaps. So we try and find ways to just make clear roles and responsibilities at the start and understand the role that we need to play, the role that the founder needs to play. And I think it does often work best when the founder is thinking whole of business and being the voice of the customer and advocate. Now, our team will support with that too, and we'll be researching and testing and iterating, but no one can think about the business at that kind of velocity and intimacy than the person who came up with the idea.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It's their baby, as they say. So they're the ones that are going to drive it and know the direction they want to take it, not necessarily the direction it should go in. And that's where the advisors come in, your support or our support to help. This is from our experience, what we've seen. Think about this potentially. But then I think probably the age of the founder makes a big difference in how much they're driving, because they don't know what they don't know. So if they think they're going to be an overnight tech bro and become a billionaire, they're not going to be driving the business the way it needs to be driven.
No. We don't often like publicly talk about this, but we do have a bit of a penchant for working with battle-scarred founders. So, someone who's maybe had a crack before, has a few, maybe some successes under their belt, but also maybe some failures too. And I think that's partly because of, we've invested some money in some VCs. and we've worked with the portfolio businesses of those VCs, and both those VCs seem to have a slightly more mature portfolio founder mix, and we would work with young founders too, and we have, and it's been great. But there's definitely a benefit from working, with someone, or there's benefit as a founder from having a good few battle scars and some tough lessons learned over a bit of a career, and that comes with a domain knowledge too. Usually, you've seen a lot of the world to identify a problem you really want to dedicate the rest of your life's work to. But that said, I have to counter that with, when I think about some of the founders we work with who are younger, usually they are wise and mature beyond their years too, and have a optimism and kind of, I guess, a risk appetite that is hard to match. So there's definitely pros and cons, but I'm assuming that you're in a similar camp to us, where actually a good seasoned and battle scarred. Maybe around the 40s, had half a life worth of work under the belt, can yield some benefits when it comes to, working with someone.
It's a different process.
Yeah.
They're not as enthusiastic as the young startup, but they also probably take your advice on more because they respect what you do a bit more than what the young ones do. But you mentioned you do get young ones that are in a different position. They're not 20, they're mid-20s, like in their mentality and the way they do things, or almost 30, like if you want to draw parallels. But the really young ones, and we haven't really worked with too many that are like the tech pro, like I mentioned, like that want to just build something. I want to build the next Facebook and take over the world. We haven't had any of those sort of clients. They're generally the ones that don't have any money.
Yeah, that's very true.
And then that's not really going to work, and unless you want to invest in it for equity or time. But you really have to believe in the idea to be able to do that. But we have worked with, the domain experts, had a career, pivoted, seen something, or I've got this really good idea. This is what I believe in. They've tried something and done it. Where you call battle worn, we have what we call rescue projects. So we get the startup founders that have tried to build something with an overseas team generally, or a local team. It doesn't have to be offshore, it's onshore and offshore. But they've jumped in too quick. They haven't planned or designed enough. 1, 2, 3 iterations sometimes, and then they're like, all right, someone told us in the network, you guys we should come to you guys to help us restart, or can we fix this and move forward? And that's the whole concept behind like DevReady. We get people development ready, so we slow you down on purpose to plan and design everything before we even start in development, and we don't do any job unless it comes through that process. Otherwise, it's too much risk for you, too much risk for us, and we're not going to know what we're building for you. You're not going to know what you're getting.
That's a great philosophy and concept. It's is it the Abraham Lincoln quote where he's if you ask me to chop down a tree, I'll spend 6 hours sharpening the axe and 2 hours chopping it down. And I totally get that. There's definitely a point where you have to jump in and get going, but as long as as long as you're all comfortable with the goals, the ambition, and the parameters that you've set up, it means you move so much faster than you would potentially if you get halfway and pivot and spin around. And we hear a lot of horror stories too when it comes to tech, and usually you bite your tongue because you think, well, I'm sure that vendor or partner wasn't necessarily bad operators. It's just the system and the project hasn't worked out well, and there's probably other things that we might mitigate to ensure that doesn't happen for us. Now we know it's gone this first time round.
If you take me back 17 years ago, I would have jumped in too early and not designed as much because I didn't know the right way to do things. It's just the way things are. But if you don't take those opportunities to learn and improve your own processes internally, you're not going to be able to help the right people the right way.
Yeah, totally. And that's been a value proposition of your business too, and similarly ours. It's for the fact that the team have spent years working together on a myriad of projects, so we've seen a lot of stuff go wrong, a lot of stuff they've had to fix, and a lot of stuff go well that they'll also want to repeat. And it does mean that engineers are pretty good at, well, certainly our team anyway, at being frank with their opinions on why we should go this way or that way. And obviously, it's a combination of product thinking, design, and technologist, that kind of triad. But there's nothing quite like technology decisions that have been made on multiple previous projects to help inform what to be done here or there, especially to a non-technical founder.
Yeah, and no one knows everything straight away. So if you are a non-technical founder and it is you haven't had many battles, your first one may fail. Your second,
Yeah.
third, fourth may fail, but you'll learn things along the way on how to do the next thing the right way. And eventually you'll find enough right things falling in place that'll get you to where you need to go.
That's it. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's probably very poorly worded there, but yeah, I think you get
No,
the
it
gist.
made perfect sense. I got the gist. Listeners will get the gist.
I don't know if everyone else will, but they're used to my ramblings. But yeah, it's we've seen stories like that where I've spoken to 100 over. I think we've spoken to over 100 founders on the podcast, maybe 130, something like that. And
Amazing.
the common thing, like I mentioned, why we started the podcast is everyone thinks they're having a problem for the first time, and no one else has encountered it. So what you're going through is what other people are going through. It's not something you've done or it's not something the team's done. It's just what happens when you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. A very common set of scenarios for starting engagement with us is it's not, hey, I've got an idea, I want to go and build it. Yeah, sure, that happens. But it's I tried to build the MVP, or we've tried to build the MVP. We've got to this point, but it wasn't working and I pulled the pin. I need help. Or it's hey, we've been building this product for 5 years and we've got some customers, it's going kind of okay, but it can't go okay. It has to go amazing, or there's not much point doing it. And then that becomes a conversation of how do you move or lift and shift from old product to a new product, or how do you build on top of something, and then then there's the other scenario of actually it's not just the product needs to evolve and I need to think about it differently. It's actually hey, we built this thing, it's the wrong thing. I'm now starting from scratch again. Let's go. So there's some pretty, in this world, most people fail, or at least they haven't succeeded yet. So there's you're definitely an anomaly if you've knocked out the park first time, or even second time around. So yeah, it's but the more planning up front you can do, and the more, I guess, sort of sharpening of the axe to and getting dev ready to use your concept, the less likely you're going to trip up.
Yeah, and I think I'll use the things of Benjamin Franklin with the light bulb. It's you haven't found enough ways not to do the right thing yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Stephen, it's been a pleasure having you on. Sure, we can probably do a couple more episodes, and we might do that in the future if you're free.
I'm sure we could.
It was a great chat. If anyone wants to find out more about yourself and Shadowboxer, how can they do that?
So, very open person. You can always jump and message me on LinkedIn. You can send me an email. I think it's on my LinkedIn profile too. It's steve@shadowboxer.co. I'm based in Cremorne in Richmond, in Melbourne, most of the time. And I'm also in Collingwood quite a lot too. So if you ever want to jump in and get a coffee, I'll be around those areas most of the week. But yeah, thank you to hear more.
We'll put those links in the show notes and share that out with everyone. And once again, thanks for making the time to have a chat today. And hopefully someone listening got something out of that.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.